Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton, Dave Gilmour and John Mayer are often referred to as some of the most iconic and influential players of modern time. So what we're going to do in today's video is have a closer look at their practice habits, how they develop their skills, so you can start practicing like a guitar icon. Make sure you go about downloading the PDF attachment for today's video with a bunch of extra tips and material. Links for that is in the description. Alright, so the first thing we're going to have a look at today is how each of these players first encountered the guitar and what was their initial influences. So Hendrix was 16 years of age when he first picked up an instrument, whilst coincidentally Mayer, Gilmour and Eric Clapton were all 13 years of age. Now they all, obviously because of the style of playing, had really strong influences from the blues genre. So Hendrix was obviously heavily influenced by players such as Albert King, Muddy Waters and B.B. King. Eric Clapton states that Big Bill Broonzy and Muddy Waters had a huge impact on him in the beginning. Dave Gilmour likes to state that Eric Clapton and Jimi Hendrix were big influences, whilst also mentioning Jeff Beck and Pete Seeger. And then John Mayer, obviously the most recent of each one of these players, states that Stevie Ray Vaughan, Jimi Hendrix obviously, and the late great B.B. King had a huge impact on his playing. So for the next part of this video, we're going to look at the method of learning. And what I mean specifically here is how did these players establish their fundamentals and what were their practice schedules looking like at this point. So we'll start with Hendrix. He's regarded as a player who's self-taught, but what self-taught musician meant back in the day more specifically is he completely immersed himself in the culture. So Hendrix would spend hours and hours listening to records, figuring out little licks and riffs to help develop his skills, his vocabulary on the instrument, to give him the base in which he would express himself when he arrived on the scene. Now Dave Gilmour and Eric Clapton, on the other hand, they vary a little bit in this regard, where they're both stated on the record is where they spent time with instructional books, particularly in the beginning, just to help developing their basic chord vocabulary and fundamental skills. But also, like Hendrix, there's plenty of cases where they both in interviews stated that they would spend a lot of time listening and emulating their heroes and influences. Now on the other hand, John Mayer is the only one of these four who actually started out with formal lessons in the beginning. However, just like Hendrix, Gilmour and Clapton, he's on the record of saying that he spent a lot of time listening and emulating his heroes to help develop his unique and lyrical sound. Now, while it's a bit difficult to get an absolute concrete number of hours that these players would go about their practice schedule, it's clear that spending a lot of time listening to records and figuring out and emulating their heroes was the main component that they would devote hours of time to every day. One thing that's worth noting whilst looking into this video was each one of these four players shared a very similar trajectory where, regardless of what method, they all worked on developing their fundamentals. They all spent significant time developing their oral skills by emulating their heroes off recordings, but there was a certain point where each one of these players would join a band where they had the opportunity to test, try out and develop their musicianship even further. Okay, so we're at the part of the video where what can we take away from how these icons went about developing their skills? One thing that's very obvious to me is that none of them were concerned about their gear in the beginning. They were all focused on just developing their skill sets, getting their chords going, developing vocabulary and developing their ears by just listening to recordings hours and hours a day. Obviously, when the skills were there down the track, then they had an amazing skill set in which to make the most of their gear, but it's obviously they weren't too concerned about gear in the beginning. The main thing, regardless of how they developed their fundamentals, whether it was through instructionals, training by ear, or with formal lessons, they all focused on that in the beginning. So developing our fundamentals is a very key component to being able to practice like an icon. But the main thing that we should be able to take away from today's video is that each one of these players identified their influences very clearly in the beginning and then devoted a huge portion of their practice time to listening, learning and emulating their heroes, using their listening skills, which was a huge component of developing their musicianship at the same time. So if you go about focusing on developing sound fundamentals in the beginning, clearly identifying your heroes, practicing emulating their soloing and phrasing styles, and then get yourself an opportunity in which you can play either with jam tracks or an ensemble preferably to develop these skills and context, you're going to be well on your way to fast tracking your skills just like the guitar icons we've looked at today. If you'd like to get my help in developing the fundamental skill sets of contemporary guitar, you can follow the links below and sign up for the HPM Guitar Fundamentals program, where you can master the fundamental skill sets of contemporary guitar in context, just like the icons we've spoken about today. Don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons. If you have any questions, drop those in the comment. I'm happy to hear from you people and get back to you there. My name is Ryan White, and catch you all in the next video.